Look at all those proud Kiwis buying Kiwi made. Look at all those real proud Kiwis standing by the flag, strutting and jiving to that special beat. Look at all those proud Kiwis buying Kiwi made.
I'm Damian Christie, welcome to Hindsight. On this episode, we're going to look at stuff. The stuff we have, the stuff we buy, the stuff we wear, the stuff that fills up our lives. Specifically, we're going to look at where that stuff comes from, where it's made. In the 1950s, the answer to that question would normally have been New Zealand. Forget made in China, we're talking made in Levin.
Busy shopping centre for farmers, Levin is also a popular town for retired people. But new houses are making a ring of suburbs round the older parts of town. The reason is that Levin's handiness to road and rail is attracting industry. This is happening with many of New Zealand's small towns. Day and night, fully fashioned nylon stockings are being woven on these clattering machines. By moving out of the big cities, the factories avoid high costs and labour shortage. Where work's near home, workers stay longer and feel settled. With the seam stitched together, close inspection rejects anything that's not perfect. After dyeing, the stockings are steam pressed and begin to look like the present you forgot to give the girlfriend on her birthday. But the new fibres that grow in test tubes haven't replaced the old favourite that grows on sheep. An up-to-date knitting factory in Levin turns out 30,000 woolen garments a year. Once girls stayed home to knit, and Dad didn't get his pullover for 6 months. 2 shirt factories at Levin are working to capacity. This simple saw cuts out 500 shirts at once. 500 shirts and 1 finger if you don't know what you're doing. Here's how nylon bristles are popped into your toothbrush. Besides toothbrushes, this factory makes brooms and vacuum brushes. While most machines are imported, it was the production engineer at Levin who built this automatic brush bender. Brushes and brooms, pullovers and cardigans, pajamas and shirts and nylon stockings, all products of thriving industry in small towns.
Insist on using a New Zealand-made vacuum cleaner these days and you'll be knee-deep in dust bunnies in no time. But half a century ago, they weren't just making vacuums here, they were making films about the fact.
Almost every carpet in the country has a vacuum cleaner over it now and then, and many of them today are made by New Zealanders. Varied skills and many materials go into every cleaner. A powerful press stamps out sections for the fan. The barrel is rolled from Whakatane fiberboard. Special cloth for the dust bag holds the dust but lets the air go through. Using a vacuum cleaner is usually women's work, and sometimes so is making them. The balance of the fan is adjusted on knife edges, for its speed will be 13,500 revs per minute. It wasn't long ago when every cleaner we had was imported. Today, 2 factories turn out over 2,000 cleaners a month within the Dominion. Helping the housewife is another field of our ever-growing secondary industries.
While you might think made in New Zealand is a synonym for high quality, that wasn't always necessarily the case. A lack of scale in some factories and industries as a whole meant that standards were often a low par, as we'll see in this next clip.
A year ago, the Consumer Institute found that some cars were poorly assembled and should never have been allowed to leave the factory floor. How do people who deal with cars day to day find them?
Now this is a year-old car, and I notice there's rust patches forming along here. What's the reason for that?
Again, insufficient preparation before the painting is done. The finish of this paint looks good, but it's deceiving. There's no depth. It's rather like a beautiful woman who is ugly beneath the surface. She is a bad woman. Again, fitting of bonnet and panels. You see the movement there. In a high wind or at speed, this would be panting.
Yeah.
This finish here on the side, Lionel, that's not necessary. I mean, that's visible from outside as though somebody had stuffed their chewing gum in there.
It's pure rough.
It's just plain rough workmanship. But you see, when the boot's shut, you see that, and it looks revolting. It doesn't matter, as long as it's on wheels and going and drives away. That's the main point.
But even the dealers have their complaints. As the middlemen, they must carry the responsibility of rectifying faults, as well as placating the irate customer.
Well, this English vehicle, let's face it, was a very, very good car indeed, in its English form. Very good car. But when it came under New Zealand Assembly, that's when we really got concerned about it. Its standard of assembly was very, very suspect.
Yet one company has tried, with success, to build and sell a vehicle designed in this country, for this country, and using more than 70% New Zealand content. Despite the sceptics, they're now turning out 60 trekkers a month, and even exporting them.
Well, all our manufacturing operation is, in fact, an outside job, so that all the work is with other local suppliers and has shown quite a considerable development, particularly of local tooling and tool manufacture for an application in the motor industry.
And this will continue?
Oh yes, we have a continuing program of development and improvement.
While it remains very much a seller's market, the industry faces the possibility of far-reaching changes dictated by trade considerations. If we are to sell more wool and mutton to Japan, for instance, how much longer can we charge a 45% tariff on Japanese cars? Irrational and expensive the industry may be by World Bank standards, but our car assembly plants have served us effectively, even if at times they've had to be goaded towards a higher New Zealand content. And if we do find faults with the cars themselves, they still fascinate us. Given the chance, we'd buy half as many again.
Welcome back. In the 80s and 90s, New Zealand manufacturing underwent massive changes. Deregulation, removal of trade barriers and globalisation meant New Zealand companies were suddenly less competitive with overseas imports. Companies were forced to change their business model if they wanted to survive, and Massport New Zealand is a great example of that. CEO Steve Hughes joins me now. Welcome.
Hi, how are you, Dan?
You started at Massport in the 1970s. Describe what the business was like then.
Well, we were a highly protected company at that stage, and we virtually anything we wanted to make, the government would give some input licence assistance and tariff protection so that we could actually make it competitively and sell it.
There seems to be a certain nostalgia around New Zealand-made goods, that they're always of very high quality, but as we saw in that previous clip, it's not always the case, is it?
Yeah. I think we've often found the odd mower we made in New Zealand that might have looked as good as the product we're actually making today. So yeah, we had air issues back then as well.
Where did those quality issues stem from?
Oh, I just think it was always really a low volume type operation, and it's a seasonal business for us. So we had to actually get temporary labour in. So training people was always a bit of a difficulty in those months where the volume was a lot higher.
How many people were employed by Massport then?
We had 650 people.
And then the 80s came along. So what happened during that time?
That was a massive change, and it probably took us 15 years, I think, to really recover and find out what we were good at doing.
It was an important change not to make your mowers onshore.
Yeah, and that came a little bit later. So in the early 2000s, we actually started to get a lot of cheap imports coming in. And we found it extremely difficult to compete, and also our export markets were struggling as well.
Tell me about the decision to start making your mowers offshore.
We actually are a business with a large cast iron foundry, and also we've got the consumer products side of the business. The foundry continued to survive and profit through that period by remaining here. A little bit more difficult to move a foundry offshore. But in terms of our other products, the lawnmowers particularly, we decided that we really had to, if we couldn't beat them, we'd have to join them. And so we set off to manufacture offshore.
Well, we can certainly confirm that the foundry's still going. It's rocking the entire building underneath us. So Massport ended up splitting its business. Tell me about that.
So we took the lawnmower manufacturer amongst a couple of other things offshore, and whilst the foundry remained here as a niche manufacturer of high quality castings.
So what does the foundry make these days?
They make for the mining and for the automotive industries, and they make a variety of castings, including cylinder blocks and brake drum housing is probably the most recognisable products.
Do you think that decision to split your manufacturing saved the company?
Oh, absolutely. We've doubled our sales in the last 5 years during the economic crisis. And we've really done that because we're now competitive internationally. We've doubled the number of markets we sell into. So Massport would have been a completely different looking business today if we hadn't have actually made that move.
Do you have any regrets moving the mower manufacturing offshore? I mean, you're not Kiwi made anymore, are you?
No, all of our engineering is still in New Zealand. In fact, we've doubled the size of our engineering department. We've also increased our staff by 50%. So there's 90 odd people working in Australia and New Zealand selling and supporting the products.
So what do you think the Massport lesson is for New Zealand businesses?
Well, I think you have to recognise when maybe things have changed to the point where you just can't continue doing the same old thing. And we've done so much more R&D since we've actually had a low manufacturing cost base. And so by actually making the decision to move offshore was the best thing we'd ever could have done.
For decades, the biggest threat to Kiwi manufacturing has come from this place right here, China. I'm in Guangzhou. It's a city many of you may never have heard of, and yet it's got 12 million people. It's one of the biggest cities in the world. It's also China's manufacturing hub. If you're wearing something that says made in China, it probably came from here. When you look at the size and scale that Guangzhou operates on, it's obvious that Kiwi manufacturers could never compete on price or range. Instead, they had to start appealing to patriotism, to our national pride, to buy Kiwi made.
The Queen presided over an event fairly rare for this country. At Government House, people forgot their political differences and presented a united front for the Buy New Zealand Made campaign. Thousands of manufacturing jobs have already gone because of Rogernomics. There are gloomy predictions even more will follow. To prevent that, the Council of Trade Unions and the Manufacturers Federation have combined to promote the Buy New Zealand Made campaign.
Cute, cuddly and Kiwi made, but local manufacturers claimed 80% of souvenirs sold here are made overseas.
Then we have Asian tourists who are coming here buying New Zealand souvenirs, and they may well be just made down the road from where they live.
Manufacturers say it's tough to spot the fakes, sheep, tikkies and kiwis on sale here, yet made in Taiwan.
And it makes it very hard for me to compete with the wages that are paid to Chinese peasants.
If every New Zealander spent $2 a week more on a New Zealand-made product rather than buying an imported product, that would result in something like 7,000 more jobs for New Zealanders every year.
In just 3 years, imports have risen from 37% to 45%. And increased imports have been blamed for the loss of nearly 58,000 New Zealand jobs in the past 10 years.
African by name, but the clothing from this live-in manufacturer is undisputedly New Zealand made.
But I think at the end of the day it's about keeping New Zealanders in jobs, and that's the bottom line for us. The bottom line is not all about profit.
It's that attitude the government wants to tap into. It's setting aside $11.5 million over 3 years to promote Kiwi-made products.
What we're trying to do with it is to really shift the culture in this country.
Icebreaker is based here, buys its merino wool and employs 100 workers here, but its clothing's made in China.
Because some of our assembly is offshore, where the technology for our industry is, it shouldn't get in the way of it being a New Zealand product.
That means it's illegal under the Fair Trading Act for Icebreaker to claim it's New Zealand made, and is supposedly enough to rule it out of a new $11 million Buy Kiwi Made campaign.
There is no intention through our campaign to allow people who don't manufacture their goods in New Zealand to pass off those goods as being manufactured here under the guise of our campaign.
iconic symbols of Kiwi culture. But how many of them are a genuine slice of God's own? Tonight we're putting the spotlight on New Zealand souvenirs.
Yeah, look, New Zealand, made of New Zealand power.
Yeah.
Where's it made? Made in China.
It soon becomes apparent that buying New Zealand made, while a noble idea, doesn't work for consumers who are highly price sensitive. And these days, let's face it, who isn't? But rather than succumb to a flood of imports, a number of New Zealanders are taking the bull by the horns, setting up offices here in China, manufacturing here for the market back home. I found 3 young Kiwis who are doing just that. Originally from Cambridge, Anna Mowbray and her brothers started up a toy company, Zuru Toys.
Shark, RoboFish and RoboShark, each sold separately. From Zuru!
Aucklander Logan Komorowski makes furniture as Komorowski Designs, while Gisborne-bred Jeremy McLaurin produces for a range of fashion brands, including his own labels, Never and Never Black. So how long have you all been in Guangzhou for?
Roughly 6 years now.
I've been here for 7, coming into my 7th year.
Yeah, 7 years as well.
Logan, you were making furniture in New Zealand. Why did you move to Guangzhou?
I just felt that manufacturing in New Zealand was becoming harder and harder. The market size was very small and made sense to move up here.
So it's both ends. It's harder to make the furniture, and when you've done that, there's no one to sell it to.
Just hard to get the support, really.
Jeremy, you were based in New Zealand. Did you ever manufacture clothes there?
No, we decided to come straight to China. We sort of saw where the market was going. The likes of Huffer and other brands were going offshore. So we did our due diligence in New Zealand and figured for the margins we were going to be making, it made sense to come straight to China.
Jeremy, what's the biggest turn-off to producing in New Zealand?
Basically the cost. Huge labour component in textiles. Plus the skill sets. Printing in New Zealand, the technology, the average age of a seamstress now is around 65.
Anna, is there any way you could have made your toys in New Zealand like you do here?
You know, I think for us it was about having something or nothing. And if we wanted to make toys in New Zealand to compete, to make a product that was actually able to compete on price point and be commercially viable, I don't think we could have done it in New Zealand. Especially because we were targeting the international market.
Logan, for you, now that you've moved here, you're not actually making that much for New Zealand at all?
No, it's under 1%, I would say. The reason being is just you put in that much effort into every customer, and whether it's a guy in New Zealand that wants 10 pieces or a guy in Germany who wants 500.
So we don't have the scale?
No, and also there's a little bit of patriotism when it comes to dealing with a Kiwi. They're constantly wanting a few dollars off here or there.
Kiwis are cheap.
I don't know how to get that across.
So you think New Zealanders drive a harder bargain?
I think, you know, every Kiwi's attitude is I can do it myself.
Anna, do you agree with that?
I got that. Well, I think that Kiwis are very hardworking, very entrepreneurial, and they think they can always do it themselves. Like Logan's definitely right there, and I think that's what makes a lot of Kiwis very successful in business.
What do your friends think of what you do in China?
I think they don't really understand China and really understand what a lot of us are doing here. It's not until you come to China and you see the scale of the, of the operations that we're setting up and the scale of the, the customers that we're kind of working with. I do believe that they think we're all running sweatshops.
They don't understand the new labour laws in China. They don't understand if you have a factory over 25 to 30 staff, you house and feed all your staff.
They think you're running child labour sweatshops.
I think, a lot of Kiwis still do that because there is still little education on how China has progressed in the last 5 years.
What's it like doing business in China versus doing business in New Zealand?
In China, nothing's ever really a barrier. If you put your mind to it, it can happen. There's no red tape to speak of, really.
Really? People would find a lack of red tape in China slightly unbelievable.
I think China's more about relationships. If you can build good relationships with the right people, it can allow things to happen quickly. So it's definitely an area where there's not as many barriers as long as you build loyalty and good relations with the people around you. So, I mean, at the same time as well, the staff and the workforce here are unbelievable. I mean, the people of China are so hungry to grow and so hungry to develop China as a whole that they're just fantastic employees. And it's something, that dedication to the company is something that maybe we wouldn't get on quite the same level in New Zealand, and that's something that I really appreciate being in China.
Logan, would you agree with that? Would you say there's less of a work-life balance here than in New Zealand?
Yeah, I think generally, especially in southern China, there's always been a sort of a trading and heavy workload, so it's nothing new for them.
Buy New Zealand made, what are your thoughts?
I love Buy New Zealand Made. I think it's a great concept. I think Kiwis have fantastic products to offer the world. I just think that New Zealand needs to focus on its core capabilities and its core skill sets, and then really tailor its industry to those. Obviously agriculture, land-based businesses, the creative element as well that's coming through, R&D, any sort of technology-based, innovative type work. Look at what New Zealand does with agriculture in terms of new products, new technologies, things like this. We have a great skill set and we have a great foundation.
So for the domestic New Zealand consumer, telling them to buy New Zealand-made clothes is unrealistic?
I do not think that's so realistic in this day and age because of the cheaper options.
Jeremy, what would bring you or your business back to New Zealand?
For our industry, I don't think there's nothing in New Zealand really to support our industry anymore, and with the way things are moving forward, we're definitely looking to keep our factories and our base in China or Southeast Asia.
Logan?
I think for my industry, because it's a little bit sort of more niche related, I'm going to work with New Zealand in a slightly different way. I plan to bring sort of young brands over to China and launch them in China. So that's how I want to work with New Zealand in the future, because I think we have got something to offer, and the New Zealand brand as such is pretty well received here. So that's how I want to work in the future.
That's a really hard one for me to answer, of all people.
Why?
Well, because we've got such extensive operations here, I think, and it's so. We've built the foundation of our company out of China. It's a very different setup to how most companies, especially in our industry or in any industry, actually would set up. We've built our head office out of China in an emerging country, trying to tap into emerging talent, and it's not something we can do in New Zealand. So for me to up and leave that and relocate to New Zealand, that would be a huge move.
You don't want to come back?
I do want to come back. I definitely want to come back.
Would you have an office there?
Definitely. That's something that's on the cards. That's definitely on the cards for the next few years, is setting up an office in New Zealand. But to move, say, manufacturing back to New Zealand would not be an option.
Well, that's it for Hindsight. We hope you enjoyed our look back at New Zealand society over the years. For more information, extended clips and any episodes you'd like to see again, check out the website. We'll see you later.
My old girl cashed her chips the day she fell into the drench. And as she lay there dying, looking like a stranded ewe, she faintly called, "Now, Brian, if something's on this television, you're gonna lose your mum, lad. I'm going far away to the holding paddock in the sky. I'm better off that way, but you're gonna need a mother.